I spent decades mastering the art of being invisible just to survive my own family. That changed on Christmas Eve when a single sentence of mine silenced the entire dinner table. They stared at me, stunned by the $150 million I had just mentioned, but they had no idea that the money was merely the opening act. The real gift I brought that night was the kind of truth that breaks a home beyond repair. My name is Ariel Marsh. I am 29 years old, and for the better part of 3 decades, I have existed as a piece of furniture in my parents' house. I was functional, occasionally necessary, but ultimately decorative and easily overlooked until someone needed to rest a drink on me. We lived in a sprawling colonial in a suburb that prided itself on manicured lawns and the kind of aggressive neighborliness that masks deep dysfunction. The sort of place where appearance was the only currency that mattered. My mother, Diane, was the banker of this currency, and she had decided long before I could form permanent memories that I was a bad investment. Her portfolio was entirely diversified into one single asset: my brother, Logan. Logan was 2 years older than me, a gap that felt like a canyon when we were children and an entire universe as we grew into adults. In Diane's eyes, the sun did not just rise in the east. It rose wherever Logan happened to be standing. I was the moon, visible only when the conditions were right, and even then, purely reflective, borrowing light I had no right to claim as my own. I learned the rules of my existence early, absorbed them through the very atmosphere of our home. Rule number 1 was that my achievements were baseline expectations, while Logan's mediocrity was cause for a parade. I remember bringing home a report card when I was 10 years old. It was flawless, every box checked, every comment from the teacher glowing with praise about my attentiveness and intelligence. I laid it on the kitchen island, smoothing out the paper next to a stack of unpaid bills. Diane was cooking dinner, the smell of roasting chicken filling the air. She glanced at the paper, wiped her hands on a towel, and gave a short nod. "That is what you are supposed to do. Ariel," she said, turning back to the stove, "you are the smart one. You do not need a gold star for doing your job." 20 minutes later, Logan burst through the back door, mud tracking from his cleats onto the pristine tile. He had managed to score a single goal in a soccer game his team ultimately lost by 4 points. Diane spun around, her face lighting up with a radiance I had never once been on the receiving end of. She rushed to him, grabbing his muddy shoulders, cooing about his athleticism, his drive, his incredible talent. We went out for ice cream that night, not because I had perfect grades, but because Logan had participated. I sat in the back seat of the minivan, watching the back of Diane's head as she laughed at everything Logan said, and I felt a small, hard stone form in my stomach. That stone would grow, layer by layer, year after year, until it became the foundation of who I am. My father was a permanent fixture in the background of these tableaux. He was a man named Robert, who seemed to view his role in the family as a strictly ceremonial position. He went to work, he came home, he sat in his leather recliner, and he watched television. He was not cruel in the way Diane was. He never made cutting remarks about my hair or compared my social life to Logan's popularity, but his silence was a weapon all its own. He saw everything. He saw the way Diane served Logan the largest portion of steak while leaving me the grisly end pieces. He saw the way she bought Logan brand new clothes for the start of the school year, hundreds of dollars dropped on designer jeans and sneakers, while telling me to look through the clearance racks or, worse, giving me her old sweaters that smelled of her perfume and condescension. There were moments when I would catch Dad looking at me across the living room, his eyes soft, perhaps even apologetic. In those fleeting seconds, I would feel a surge of hope, a desperate wish that he would stand up, clear his throat, and say, "Diane, that is enough. Treat her fairly." But the moment always passed. He would blink, shift his gaze back to the news anchor on the screen, and retreat into his bubble of safety. It was easier for him to let me be the sacrificial lamb than to risk an argument with Diane. His peace was purchased with my pain. Dinner time was the daily ritual where my invisibility was most potent. We sat at a heavy oak table, the four of us, in seats that were assigned by unspoken law. Diane sat at the head, naturally, Logan to her right, Dad to her left, and me, across from Diane, where she could look through me to check the clock on the wall behind my head. The conversation always followed a script. Diane would ask Logan about his day. Logan, who loved the sound of his own voice almost as much as Diane did, would launch into long, winding stories about nothing. He talked about his friends, about the girls who liked him, about the teachers who were treating him unfairly because they just didn't understand his genius. Diane hung on every word, nodding, gasping, affirming him. "You are so right, honey," she would say. "They just do not see your potential." If I tried to speak, the dynamic shifted instantly. I would wait for a pause, a lull in the monologue, and clear my throat. I might say something about the book I was reading, or a project I was working on. The reaction was immediate. Diane would sigh, a sharp intake of breath that signaled I had committed a grave social error. "Ariel, honey, not now," she would say, her voice tight. "Logan was telling us something important. We can get to your little stories later." But later never came. By the time Logan finished, dinner was over. Plates were being cleared, and the window had closed. I learned to eat quickly and silently. I learned that my voice was an interruption. I learned that in the economy of our family, attention was a finite resource, and Logan had a monopoly. As I entered my teenage years, the disparity moved from emotional to financial. The investment in Logan was staggering. Tutors for classes he was failing, sports camps for teams he would eventually quit, a car when he turned 16 that cost more than I could fathom. When I turned 16, I got a card and a $20 bill. When I asked about driving lessons, Diane laughed. "We are pouring everything into Logan's college fund right now." "Ariel," she said, pouring herself a glass of wine, "you are smart. You can figure it out. Besides, you can take the bus. It builds character." Character. That was the word she used to dress up her neglect. My struggle was character building. Logan's ease was his birthright. I stopped asking for things. I stopped asking for rides, for money, for help with school projects. I became an expert in self-reliance out of necessity. I learned to sew my own clothes or alter things I found at thrift stores. I walked 3 miles to the library to use the internet because the computer at home was always in Logan's room, and I was not allowed to disturb him while he was gaming. I got a job under the table babysitting for neighbors when I was 13, hoarding every dollar in a shoebox taped under my bed frame. I observed them. I watched how Diane would massage Logan's ego when he failed, blaming the world for his shortcomings. I watched how she would groom him before family gatherings, making sure his shirt was pressed, rehearsing his accomplishments so she could recite them to aunts and uncles. "And this is Logan," she would beam. "He is captain of the varsity team this year. We are expecting scouts from the big universities any day now." "And what is Ariel up to?" a relative might ask, peering around Logan's broad shoulder to see me standing by the wall. "Oh, Ariel is fine," Diane would say dismissively, waving a hand. "She is just reading her books. You know how she is. So quiet." I was quiet because I was recording. I was documenting. I understood by the time I was 15 that love in this house was not a natural phenomenon like rain or sunshine. It was a transaction. It was conditional. Logan received love because he reflected Diane's vanity back at her. He was the golden boy, the extension of her ego. I was the control group. I was the reminder of what ordinary looked like, existing solely to make Logan shine brighter by comparison. There was a specific evening that seared this reality into my soul. I was 17. I had been selected for a prestigious summer internship at a tech firm in the city, a program usually reserved for college students. It was a massive achievement, one that came with a stipend and a letter of recommendation that could open doors to the Ivy League. I came home, bursting with a rare excitement, holding the acceptance letter. I walked into the kitchen, and before I could speak, Diane held up a hand. Her face was etched with worry. "Not now. Ariel," she snapped. "Logan crashed the car." My heart stopped. "Is he okay?" "He is fine," she said, pacing the floor. "But the bumper is destroyed. We are going to have to pay the deductible, and the insurance rates are going to skyrocket." God, the stress is killing me. I stood there, the letter crumbling in my grip. I realized then that even my brother's disasters were more important than my triumphs. His wreckage took up more space than my construction. I quietly folded the letter, put it in my pocket, and went to my room. I never told them about the internship. I took the bus into the city every day that summer, telling Diane I was volunteering at the library. She never checked. She never asked. She was too busy driving Logan to his court dates for the traffic violation. That was the summer I stopped waiting for them to see me. I realized that if I wanted a life, I would have to build it in the shadows, brick by brick, using the silence they gave me as mortar. They thought I was merely existing, a background character in the Logan show. They had no idea that I was already writing a new script, one where I would eventually exit stage left and never look back. But the pain of it, the deep, dull ache of being unloved in your own home, that was something I carried with me every single day. It was the fuel that kept me warm in the cold draft of their indifference. The envelope that arrived in the mail was thick, heavy with the promise of escape. I stood by the mailbox at the end of the driveway, feeling the texture of the paper under my thumb, knowing exactly what it contained before I even tore the seal. It was a full academic scholarship to a state university renowned for its computer science program. It covered tuition, books, and housing. It was not just an acceptance letter, it was an emancipation proclamation. I walked into the house, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that felt like a war drum. Diane was in the living room, on the phone. Her voice pitched to that frantic, breathless frequency she reserved solely for matters concerning Logan. "I cannot believe they require a drug test," she was saying, pacing a tight circle on the Persian rug. "He is a creative spirit. Ray, you need to call the hiring manager. Tell him Logan has anxiety. Tell him anything. Just fix it." She hung up and turned to me, her eyes still glazed with the stress of managing my brother's life. I held up the letter. "I got in," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Full ride, engineering and computer science." Diane blinked, processing the information as if I had just told her the weather forecast for a different continent. She let out a short exhale, not of pride, but of relief. "Oh, good," she said, smoothing her skirt. "That is excellent news. Ariel, that saves us about $20,000 a year. We are going to need that liquidity. Logan's internship in the city is unpaid, and we have to subsidize his rent in that loft he found." That was it. No hug, no cake, no, "well done." My 4 years of sleepless nights and perfect grades were merely a line item on the family budget, a cost-saving measure that freed up capital for the Logan Investment Fund. The disparity became a chasm a few months later. We graduated from our respective institutions, me from high school, Logan from a jagged, 6-year stumble through a liberal arts college where he majored in general studies. My ceremony was on a Tuesday morning. Diane and Dad came, but they checked their watches throughout the valedictorian speech. We went to a chain restaurant afterward for lunch, where Diane spent the entire meal complaining about the service. 2 weeks later, for Logan's departure to his internship, they threw a gala. It was held in the backyard, catered by a firm that charged $50 a plate. There were string lights, a DJ, and an open bar. Friends and neighbors swarmed the patio, raising glasses to Logan's bright future. My brother stood in the center of it all, holding a beer, accepting accolades for a job he had not yet started and had only obtained because Dad played golf with the CEO. I spent the evening of the party in my room, packing. I had to leave for my freshman orientation the next morning. I folded my clothes into cardboard boxes I had scavenged from the back of a liquor store. The bass from the music downstairs vibrated through the floorboards, shaking the frame of my bed. Around midnight, the noise finally died down. I dragged my boxes out to my beat-up sedan, loading them by the light of the moon. No one came out to say goodbye. No one handed me a check or a care package. I drove away at 6 in the morning while the house was still dark. hungover from celebrating the wrong child. University was a cold splash of reality. While Logan was posting photos of rooftop bars and networking dinners, I was discovering the true definition of exhaustion. The scholarship covered the basics, but it did not cover food, toiletries, or the laptop I desperately needed to run the heavy code compilers for my classes. I took a job working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner near campus. I would attend lectures from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, study until 9 at night, and then tie on a grease-stained apron and pour coffee for truckers and drunk students until 4 in the morning. I slept in 3-hour bursts. My diet consisted of stale bagels from the diner and instant noodles. It was during one of those hollowed-out nights in the computer lab that the idea came to me. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. My eyes were burning, dry and red, staring at lines of C++ code that were beginning to blur together. I had forgotten to drink water for 12 hours. I had not walked more than the distance from my dorm to the lab in 3 days. My body was failing me because I was treating it like a machine that did not need maintenance. I opened a new terminal window. I did not do it for a grade, and I certainly did not do it for money, because I had none. I did it because I needed to visualize my own survival. I started writing a script. It was simple at first, a command line interface that forced me to log my water intake, my sleep hours, and my caloric density. But then, the coder in me took over. I wanted it to be better. I wanted it to be predictive. I began building an algorithm that could analyze patterns. If I slept less than 4 hours on a Tuesday, the program would predict a crash by Thursday and suggest a modified schedule to mitigate the damage. I called it Vitality in my head, a working title for the pulse I was trying to keep from fading. I became obsessed. I spent every spare second between serving pancakes and attending lectures refining the code. I taught myself mobile app development from pirate PDF textbooks I found online because I could not afford the real ones. I learned user interface design by analyzing the apps on the phones of the customers I served, peeking over their shoulders as I refilled their mugs. For 6 months, I built it. It was ugly, utilitarian, and buggy, but it worked. It was the first thing in my life that was entirely mine. It listened to me. If I inputted data, it gave me a truthful output. It did not play favorites. It did not lie. During the winter break of my sophomore year, I made the mistake of thinking things might be different. I drove home, exhausted but vibrating with a quiet pride. I had a prototype on my phone. It was functional. I wanted to show my mother. I wanted to show her that I was creating something from nothing, that I was building a future with my bare hands, while Logan was busy getting fired from his second internship for creative differences. I found her in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. The house smelled of pine and expensive candles. "Mom," I said, pulling out my phone, "I wanted to show you something I have been working on. It is an app. I built it myself." Diane glanced at me, the knife never stopping its rhythm against the cutting board. "An app?" she asked, her tone flat. "Like a game?" "No, not a game," I said, stepping closer, desperate for her to look at the screen. "It is for health tracking. It uses an algorithm to predict burnout and suggest habit changes. See, right here. It shows that my hydration is low, so it adjusts my—" The phone on the counter buzzed. It was a text message. Diane dropped the knife and snatched the phone up as if it were oxygen. "It is Logan," she gasped, reading the screen. "Oh, thank God. He says the tow truck finally arrived. His car broke down on the freeway again. I told him that vintage Mustang was unreliable, but he just loves the aesthetic." She started typing a furious reply, her thumbs flying. "Mom," I said, my voice quiet. "The app." She didn't look up. She didn't even pause. "Not now." "Ariel," she muttered, "your brother is stranded on the side of the road. We have to wire him money for the mechanic. Honestly, can you not see that we are dealing with a crisis here? Put your little phone game away." I stood there for a long moment. The screen of my phone was still glowing, displaying the code that had saved my sanity. Little phone game. That was what my blood, sweat, and sleepless nights amounted to in her eyes. A distraction, a nuisance interrupting the real work of coddling Logan. I turned off the screen. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "Okay," I said. Diane did not hear me. She was already dialing the bank. That was the last time I ever tried to share my life with her. I walked out of the kitchen, went upstairs to my childhood bedroom, and packed my bag. I drove back to campus that same night, leaving a note saying I had been called in for an extra shift. It was a lie, but it didn't matter. They wouldn't have noticed if I was there or not. Back in my dorm room, in the silence of the empty building, I opened my laptop. I looked at the code for vitality. I realized then that I had been coding for an audience of one, myself, and that was fine. In fact, it was better. If they didn't know what I was building, they couldn't touch it, they couldn't minimize it, and they couldn't take it away to give to Logan. I typed a new line of code, burying a command deep in the kernel. From that day forward, my success would be a black box. I would build an empire in the dark, and by the time they realized what I had done, the walls would be too high for them to climb. I worked through the night, the blue light of the screen the only warmth I needed. The separation was complete. They had their golden boy, and he was expensive, needy, and fragile. I was iron, forged in the cold, and I was just getting started. I finished my degree in 3 years. There was no genius strategy behind the accelerated timeline, nor was there a desire to impress the Dean's List Committee. It was purely a matter of economics. Every semester I shaved off was $15,000 of debt I did not have to accrue. While my peers were planning their gap years or organizing elaborate graduation parties, I was quietly filing paperwork to have my diploma mailed to a post office box in the city. I did not walk across the stage. I did not buy the cap and gown. To me, the degree was not a milestone to be celebrated with champagne and balloons. It was a receipt for a transaction I had finally completed. I moved to the city with 2 duffel bags and a bank account that hovered dangerously close to zero. My first office was not a gleaming glass tower in the tech district. It was a 300-square-foot room above a bakery that specialized in sourdough. The air permanently smelled of yeast and burnt flour, and the radiator clanked with a violence that made it impossible to take phone calls without apologizing. The rent was $800 a month, a sum that terrified me, but it was the first space in my life that Diane and Logan could not enter. There were no pictures of my brother on the walls. There was no heavy silence at the dinner table. There was only me, my secondhand desk, and the hum of my server. The app, Vitality, was growing. It was not the explosive, overnight viral success that people read about in magazines. It was a slow, steady burn. I had no marketing budget, so I relied on the most ancient and reliable form of advertising, which was word of mouth. People started using it because it actually worked. They told their friends that there was an app that did not nag them or shame them, but actually helped them understand their bodies. We hit 10,000 users in the first 4 months, then 50,000, then 100,000. I was living on less than $10 a day. I ate oatmeal for breakfast and dinner, and for lunch. I usually skipped the meal entirely to focus on code patches. But the user base kept climbing, and the server costs were climbing with it. I realized I could no longer do it alone. I needed an engineer to handle the back-end architecture while I focused on the product development. Hiring my first employee was the most terrifying moment of my life up to that point. His name was Marcus, a quiet guy with a brilliant mind for database management who had been overlooked by the big firms because he did not have a flashy degree. I sat him down at a folding table in that yeasty office and looked him in the eye. "I can pay you $60,000 a year." I told him, "It is not market rate. I know that. But I can promise you equity, and I can promise you that your paycheck will never be late, ever." He took the job, for the next year. I felt the weight of that promise every single day. There were months when I did not pay myself a single cent, so that I could cover Marcus's salary and the server bills. I would stare at the company bank account, watching the numbers dwindle, and feel a cold sweat prickle on my back. But on the 1st and the 15th of every month, Marcus got his deposit. I learned that leadership was not about standing in front of a crowd and taking a bow. It was about eating glass in the dark so your team didn't have to. While I was sweating over payroll and debugging code at 3 in the morning, the family group chat, which I had muted but not yet left, was a constant stream of Logan's failures disguised as adventures. Diane would post photos of Logan in a new suit, standing in a sleek, modern office, so proud of Logan for launching his new consulting firm. The caption would read, 2 months later, there would be a vague post about unfair market conditions and enemies who are jealous of success. Then, photos of Logan on a beach in Bali or skiing in Aspen, taking a much-needed mental health reset. Diane would write, I knew the code behind those posts. I knew that the consulting firm had folded because Logan never showed up to meetings. I knew the mental health reset was funded by a second mortgage on my parents' house or a liquidation of retirement assets. Diane was funneling tens of thousands of dollars into a hole that could never be filled, propping up Logan's ego while I was negotiating with my landlord to keep the heat on. I never commented. I never liked the posts. I stayed silent. In their minds, I was probably working a dead-end job, barely scraping by. I let them believe that. My obscurity was my armor. If they knew I was building something real, Diane would have found a way to claim it. Or worse, she would have demanded I hire Logan to run the strategy. I kept my head down and let the work speak for itself. By the end of my second year, Vitality had 500,000 active users. The data we were collecting was becoming valuable. We were not just tracking steps. We were predicting health outcomes. That was when the sharks started circling. The first offer came in via a courier letter, printed on thick, cream-colored stationery. It was from a mid-sized data conglomerate known for buying up lifestyle apps and stripping them for parts. I sat in my office, which now had 3 employees and proper ergonomic chairs, and read the number. $5 million. I stared at the words. $5 million. It was enough to retire. It was enough to buy a house in the hills. It was enough to never worry about the price of oatmeal again. For a fleeting second, I thought about printing a copy of the check and mailing it to Diane just to see the look on her face. But then I read the terms. The acquisition came with a stipulation. They wanted full access to the user data. They intended to sell the health profiles of my users, people who trusted me with their sleep patterns, their heart rates, their anxiety logs, to insurance companies. They wanted to use Vitality to adjust premiums and deny coverage based on the very data that was supposed to help people get better. I looked at Marcus, who was typing away in the corner. I looked at the whiteboard where we had mapped out our mission statement. Privacy, integrity, health. If I took the money, I became Logan. I would be taking the easy payout at the expense of someone else. I would be selling out the people who believed in me just to make myself comfortable. I picked up the phone and called the representative who had sent the offer. The answer is no, I said. There was a pause on the other end. Miss Marsh, the voice said, smooth and condescending, perhaps you did not read the figure correctly. We are offering $5 million. For an app run out of a bakery, this is a life-changing amount of money. I read it correctly, I replied. My user data is not for sale. The integrity of the platform is not for sale. Do not call me again. I hung up. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was shaking from adrenaline. I had just turned down $5 million. I walked to the window and looked out at the street below. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. I had passed the test. I had proven that I was not my mother's daughter. However, silence is loud in the business world. Turning down that offer did not make me disappear. It made me a beacon. In Silicon Valley, saying no to easy money is the ultimate power move. It signals that you know you are worth more. It signals that you are dangerous. Word got around. The girl in the bakery who turned down $5 million. Suddenly, the emails in my inbox were not from mid-level data miners. They were from venture capital firms with billions of dollars in assets. They were from the real players. They wanted to know what I had that was worth protecting so fiercely. I had built a fortress out of my solitude. I had constructed a company on the bedrock of the neglect I had suffered. I did not need their validation, and I certainly did not need their permission. I was playing a long game, one that Diane and Logan did not even know existed, and as the valuation of my company began to climb from 5 million to 10, then to 20, I realized that the distance between me and my family was no longer measured in miles. It was measured in zeros. I was becoming a titan in the dark, preparing for the day when I would finally step into the light. The offer did not come with fanfare. It arrived in the form of a binding letter of intent delivered by a senior partner from a law firm that charged more per hour than my father made in a month. The company was Ether Systems, a massive tech conglomerate that was looking to integrate a predictive health algorithm into their wearable ecosystem. They did not want to strip Vitality for parts. They wanted the engine, and they wanted me to stay on as a consultant to ensure it kept running. The number on the page was so large it looked like a mistake. $150 million. I sat in my office, the air conditioner humming a low, steady note, and stared at the figure. I read it out loud, testing the weight of the syllables on my tongue. 150 million. It was an abstraction, a sequence of digits that promised to sever the gravitational pull of my past permanently. But getting from that letter of intent to a signed contract was a war of attrition that lasted 6 grueling months. The due diligence process was invasive and exhaustive. Ether Systems sent a legion of auditors to comb through every line of code I had ever written, every email I had ever sent, and every financial transaction I had ever authorized. They were looking for cracks in the foundation. They were looking for a reason to lower the price or walk away entirely. I spent 18 hours a day in conference rooms, flanked by my own legal team, defending the architecture of my life's work. There were moments when I wanted to scream. The pressure was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until it was difficult to breathe. I was sleeping 4 hours a night, subsisting on black coffee and adrenaline. My phone would buzz in my pocket during these high-stakes meetings, vibrating with notifications from the family group chat. Logan needs a new suit for his interview. Diane would text, "Everyone send good vibes." "Can someone lend me $50 for gas?" Logan would add, "Venmo is down." I would look at these messages under the mahogany table, while lawyers across from me argued about intellectual property rights worth tens of millions of dollars. The dissonance was dizzying. My family was squabbling over tank fills while I was negotiating an exit that would generate more wealth than our entire lineage had produced in 3 centuries. I never replied to the texts. I simply turned the phone over and focused on the clause regarding user privacy. I refused to budge on it. Vitality would remain a closed loop. No data sales, no third-party access. It was the one condition that almost killed the deal. But I held the line because I knew that without integrity, the money was just a bribe. Finally, on a rainy Tuesday in November, the deal was done. I signed my name on the final page of a stack of documents that was 3 inches thick. There was no confetti, there was no champagne toast, just a handshake from the CEO of Ether, a curt nod from their lead counsel, and a quiet ride back to my apartment in a town car. When the wire transfer hit my account 48 hours later, I logged into my banking app. The balance looked like a glitch, $150 million, minus taxes and fees, but still an amount so astronomical it rendered the concept of cost irrelevant. I stared at the screen for a long time. I expected to feel triumphant. I expected to feel a surge of joy. Instead, I felt a profound, echoing silence. The money was there, but I was still Ariel. I was still the girl who had eaten lunch alone in the library. I was still the daughter who came second. The money had changed my circumstances, but it had not changed my history. I closed the laptop and made a decision. I would tell no one. Not yet. If I told Diane, the narrative would shift instantly. I would no longer be the invisible daughter. I would be the family bank. The money would be treated as a communal resource, something owed to them for raising me. Logan would see it as his venture capital fund. Diane would see it as her retirement plan and her social climbing ladder. They would consume it, and in the process, they would consume me. I needed to protect this resource just as I had protected my code. So I did something radical. I hired a therapist. Her name was Dr. Evans, and her office was a quiet sanctuary with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the park. For the first time in my life, I paid someone to listen to me. I sat on her couch and unpacked the boxes I had kept sealed in the basement of my psyche for 29 years. I talked about the dinner table. I talked about the graduation party that never happened. I talked about the way Diane's eyes lit up for Logan and glazed over for me. It is not about the money. Ariel, Dr. Evans told me during one session, you are waiting for them to validate you. You think that if you show them the check, they will finally say, we see you, we value you, but you have to accept the possibility that they are incapable of seeing you, regardless of your net worth. That hit me harder than the exhaustion of the negotiations. I realized she was right. I was still harboring a childish fantasy that I could buy their love with my success. I needed to kill that fantasy before I went home. I needed to walk into that house not as a daughter seeking approval, but as a woman who no longer needed it. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, I put my new resources to work. I did not buy a sports car or a mansion. I established the Marsh Grant for Women in Technology. I endowed it with $5 million to start, creating a scholarship fund for girls who, like me, had no support system. I wanted to be the person for them that no one had been for me. Reviewing the applications, seeing the hunger and the brilliance in these young women, gave me a satisfaction that the bank balance alone could not provide. Then came the summons. It was a text from Diane, sent to the group chat 3 weeks before Christmas. Christmas dinner's at 6 o'clock this year. Do not be late. And Ariel, please try to come early to help me prep the turkey. Logan is bringing a date, and I want everything to be perfect. I looked at the message. The old Ariel would have felt the familiar spike of anxiety and the heavy burden of obligation. The old Ariel would have shown up at noon, chopped vegetables for 4 hours, and listened to Diane critique her outfit. But the new Ariel was a centimillionaire who had survived a boardroom of sharks. I will be there, I typed back, but I will not be coming early. I did not wait for a response. I opened a travel app and booked a suite at the Kensington, the most exclusive hotel in our hometown. It was the kind of place Diane drove past slowly, gazing at the valet stand with envy. I booked the presidential suite for 5 nights. I was not going to sleep in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and listening to the ghosts of my loneliness. I was going to sleep in Italian linens, order room service, and establish a physical boundary that mirrored my emotional one. I began to prepare for the dinner as if it were a board meeting. I was not going there to eat turkey. I was going there to close the loop. I went to the bank and requested a specific document, a verified proof of funds letter. I folded it carefully and placed it in a sleek leather envelope. I also went shopping, but not for the usual gifts. I did not buy Diane a scarf she would never wear or get Dad a tie he would stain with gravy. I bought myself a dress. It was a deep emerald green, tailored to perfection, made of silk that whispered when I moved. It was elegant, expensive, and commanded attention. It was armor. On the morning of Christmas Eve, I drove to my hometown. I checked into the Kensington, handing my keys to the valet. The concierge greeted me by name, treating me with a deference that felt foreign but welcome. Up in the suite, I stood by the window and looked out over the town. I could see the suburbs stretching out in the distance, the grid of streets where I had learned to make myself small. I took a shower, washing away the city grit. I did my hair and makeup with precision. As I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger staring back. This woman was not the scowling, hunch-shouldered girl who tried to blend into the wallpaper. This woman was powerful. She was dangerous. I sat down at the desk in the hotel room and opened the leather envelope. I looked at the document one last time. This was my gift. It was a grenade with the pin pulled, wrapped in paper. They thought they were getting the sullen, obedient daughter for Christmas. They had no idea that I was bringing the apocalypse. My phone buzzed. It was Logan. Mom is freaking out that you are not here yet. Where are you? I picked up the phone and typed a reply. I am on my way. I stood up, grabbed my purse and the leather envelope, and walked out of the suite. I took the elevator down to the lobby, my heels clicking a sharp, rhythmic cadence on the marble floor. The car was waiting. It was time to go home and burn the house down with the truth. I pulled the rental car into the driveway at exactly 6 o'clock. The house looked exactly the same as it had when I left it, frozen in a time capsule of beige siding and manicured boxwood hedges. It stood there, imposing and silent, a monument to a childhood I had spent trying to escape. The Christmas wreath on the door was new, oversized and dusted with fake snow, but the peeling paint on the garage door frame was the same. It was a perfect metaphor for my family. Decorate the surface, ignore the rot. I sat in the car for a moment, the engine idling. My hands were gripping the leather steering wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles white. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of the rental car's air freshener, and exhaled slowly. I reached over to the passenger seat and touched the leather envelope. It was cool and smooth. It was my shield. I stepped out into the biting December air, the heels of my boots crunching on the gravel, and walked up the path. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped into the foyer. The heat of the house hit me first, dry and suffocating, smelling of roasting turkey and Diane's cloying floral perfume. "Hello?" I called out. "Ariel?" Diane's voice floated from the kitchen. "You are late. We are already behind schedule." I was not late. I was exactly on time. But in this house, I was always structurally in the wrong. I closed the door behind me and took off my coat. I walked down the hallway, and it was like walking through a gallery curated solely to erase my existence. The walls were a shrine to Logan. There was Logan in his Little League uniform, smiling with a gap-toothed grin. There was Logan at his high school graduation, looking bored in his gown. There was a framed newspaper clipping from the local Gazette about a charity drive Logan had organized in college, a drive that I had done all the administrative work for, though my name appeared nowhere in the text. I stopped at the console table near the stairs. There were 8 framed photos arranged on the lace runner. 7 of them were of Logan. 1 was of my parents on their wedding day. I looked for myself. I looked for a graduation photo, a school portrait, anything. I finally found myself in the background of a picture taken at a family barbecue 5 years ago. I was blurry, standing near the grill, holding a tray of burgers, half of my face obscured by Logan's elbow as he flexed for the camera. I was a ghost in my own history. I walked into the kitchen. Diane was standing by the oven, basting a turkey that looked dry. She was wearing a red dress that was too tight and an apron that said, "Queen of the Kitchen." She looked up as I entered, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. She did not smile. She did not offer a hug. She assessed me like a piece of inventory that had arrived with damaged packaging. "That dress is a bit much for a family dinner, is it not?" she said, turning back to the bird. "We are just eating in the dining room. Ariel, not going to a gala." "It is festive," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "It is flashy," she corrected. "Grab an apron. The potatoes are boiled, but they need to be mashed. And do not use the electric mixer. It ruins the texture. Use the hand masher." I stood there for a second. In my other life, the one I lived in the city, I was a woman who had just negotiated with a team of corporate sharks. I was a woman who commanded a room. I was a woman worth millions. Here, I was the potato masher. I could have said no. I could have turned around and walked out. But that would have been too easy. It would have given them the satisfaction of calling me difficult. I wanted to play the role one last time so they would have no excuse when the curtain finally fell. I walked over to the drawer, took out the apron, and tied it over my silk dress. "Where is Dad?" I asked. "In the den," Diane said, wiping a smudge of grease from the counter. "Watching the game. Do not disturb him. He has had a long week." "And Logan?" "He is upstairs getting ready," she said, her voice softening instantly. "He brought a girl, Sienna. She is very sweet. Her father owns a dealership chain. Logan says it is a very strategic match." Strategic, not romantic, not loving, strategic. I picked up the heavy ceramic bowl of potatoes and started mashing. The physical exertion felt good. It gave me something to focus on other than the rising tide of resentment in my chest. 10 minutes later, Logan strolled into the kitchen. He looked older, his face carrying the puffiness of too many late nights and too much alcohol, but he still moved with the unearned confidence of a prince. A girl trailed behind him, looking nervous and young. "Hey, little sister," Logan said, clapping me on the shoulder hard enough to make me stumble slightly. "Long time no see. You remember Sienna?" I did not, because I had never met her, but I nodded. "Hi, Sienna." Sienna gave a small wave. "You look great." "Ariel, I love your dress." "See," I said to Diane, who was busy arranging rolls in a basket. "Sienna likes it." Logan laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Yeah, well, Sienna is polite. But seriously, Ariel, you look like you are trying to sell real estate. What are you up to these days anyway? Still doing that computer support thing?" I mashed the potatoes harder. "It is software development." Logan. Right, he said, grabbing a carrot stick from the counter and crunching it loudly. "Coding, nerd stuff. I never understood how you could sit in a dark room all day staring at a screen. Sounds miserable. Me. I need people. I need the energy of the room. That is why I'm killing it in sales right now." I paused. "Really? What are you selling?" Logan exchanged a glance with Diane, a quick, flickering look that spoke volumes. "I am in high-end asset management," he said, puffing out his chest. "Connecting investors with opportunities. Big stuff. You would not understand the nuance of it. It is very relationship-based." I understood perfectly. He was unemployed and hustling, likely scamming people or living off Diane's credit cards while calling himself a consultant. "That sounds fascinating," I said. "Dinner is ready," Diane announced, clapping her hands. "Everyone to the table. Ariel, bring the potatoes, and the gravy boat, and the water pitcher." I carried the heavy dishes to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates that were only used for special occasions. My father was already seated at his end of the table. He looked up when I came in, gave me a brief, watery smile, and then looked back down at his napkin. "Hi, Dad," I said. "Hello, Ariel," he mumbled. "Good to see you." That was it. No questions, no interest. Just a generic greeting he could have offered to a mailman. I took my seat. It was the same seat I had sat in for 20 years. The one facing the window, directly across from Diane, with the draft hitting my back. Logan sat to Diane's right, the position of honor. Sienna sat next to him. Diane orchestrated the meal like a conductor. She directed the passing of the dishes, ensuring Logan got the first serving of everything. "Logan, take the drumstick," she insisted. "You need the protein." I served myself a small portion of turkey and a spoonful of the potatoes I had mashed. I watched them. I watched the way Diane leaned in whenever Logan spoke, her face rapt with attention. I watched the way Dad ate in silence, mechanically moving his fork from plate to mouth, completely checked out of the family dynamic. I watched Logan preen for his date, dropping names of people he didn't know and bragging about deals that didn't exist. "So, Ariel," Logan said, pointing his fork at me, "Mom said you are living in some studio apartment in the city?" "It is a one-bedroom," I said. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "That must be tight. I do not know how you live like that. I am looking at a penthouse downtown right now. 3,000 square feet, floor-to-ceiling glass. I need the space to think, you know?" I took a sip of water. It is amazing what you can afford when you have an imagination. I said. The table went quiet. Diane's head snapped up. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked sharply. "Nothing," I said calmly. "Just that Logan has big dreams." Diane narrowed her eyes. "There is nothing wrong with ambition. Ariel, at least your brother is trying to build an empire. He is taking risks. You have always been so safe, so risk-averse. That is why you are where you are, and he is where he is." I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the lines of bitterness etched around her mouth. I saw the desperate delusion in her eyes. She genuinely believed that. She believed that my stability was a failure, and Logan's chaotic spiraling was genius in waiting. "Where am I?" "Mom?" I asked quietly. Diane sighed, waving her hand dismissively. You know what I mean. You are plodding along. You are surviving. But Logan is going to be a star. We just have to support him until the world catches up. Sienna looked uncomfortable, shifting in her seat. Dad kept eating, staring at his peas. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was the same feeling I had when I executed a final line of code and watched the program run perfectly. The data was verified. The variables were set. There was nothing left to analyze. I realized then that I had been holding on to a tiny, foolish shred of hope. I had hoped that maybe, just maybe, if I came back here, they would sense the change in me. I thought they might see the way I held myself, the quality of my clothes, the calmness in my voice, and realize that I was no longer the doormat. But they couldn't see it. They were blind to everything that didn't fit their narrative. To them, I would always be Ariel the invisible, Ariel the servant, Ariel the background noise. I reached down and touched the leather envelope resting against the leg of my chair. It was time. The potatoes were cold, the turkey was dry, and I was done. I am glad you brought that up. Mom, I said, placing my fork down on the china with a deliberate click. The concept of support, and where we all are. Diane frowned. What are you talking about? I am talking about the fact that I have some news. I said. Logan rolled his eyes. Did you get a promotion? Are you finally making $50,000 a year? I looked at him. His smirk was so familiar. It was the same smirk he had worn when he crashed my bike and blamed me. It was the same smirk he had worn when he stole money from my wallet and told Mom I lost it. No, Logan, I said. I did not get a promotion. Then what? Diane snapped. Hurry up, Ariel. We have dessert waiting. I picked up the leather envelope and placed it on the table. The sound of the heavy paper hitting the tablecloth was soft, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a gavel falling. I sold my company, I said. The room went dead silent. Logan stopped chewing. Diane froze with her wine glass halfway to her mouth. Even Dad looked up. Your company? Logan scoffed. You mean that little health app you were tinkering with in college? Who did you sell it to? Some gym for $5,000? I slid the envelope across the table toward my father. I wanted him to open it. I wanted the neutral party, the silent witness, to read the verdict. Open it, Dad, I said. My father wiped his hands on his napkin. He looked at Diane, who gave him a confused nod. He reached out and took the envelope. He opened the flap and pulled out the single sheet of paper. It was the proof of funds letter from the bank, verifying the liquid cash balance in my personal account. He put on his reading glasses. He stared at the paper. He blinked. He pulled the paper closer, then pushed it away, adjusting the focal length. His mouth opened slightly. Ray? Diane asked, her voice sharp. What is it? Is she in trouble? Is it a bill? My father looked up at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of shock and something that looked like fear. It says, he stammered, it says the balance is $150 million. Diane dropped her wine glass. It hit the table, shattering the stem, and red wine flooded across the white tablecloth like a wound opening up, but no one moved to clean it. What? Logan whispered. $150 million, I repeated, my voice steady and cold. I sold Vitality to Ether Systems. The deal closed last month. The money is in my account. I looked at them. I looked at the shock on their faces. I waited for the happiness. I waited for the congratulations. I waited for them to say, "We are so proud of you." But that is not what happened. I saw the gears turning in Diane's head. I saw the calculation replacing the shock. I saw Logan's face twist from disbelief to a dark, ugly envy. And in that moment, as the wine dripped onto the carpet, I knew that the hardest part of the night was not the reveal. It was going to be the aftermath. The silence that followed my declaration was absolute. It was not the quiet of a library or a church. It was the vacuum of a bomb site immediately after detonation, before the debris starts to fall. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic dripping of the red wine from the edge of the table onto the Persian rug, a steady, metronomic count of the seconds that were ticking by while their brains tried to process a reality that had just violently shifted on its axis. My father was the first to move. He took off his reading glasses, his hands trembling slightly, and placed them on the table next to the wine stain. He looked at the document, then at me, then back at the document. It was as if he was trying to reconcile the daughter he had ignored for 29 years with the net worth printed on that page. The math did not add up in his head. Logan, however, was not looking at me. He was staring at the paper in Dad's hand, his face a mask of twisted confusion. He reached out and snatched the letter, nearly ripping it. He held it up to the light, scanning it with frantic eyes. "This is fake," he spat out, his voice cracking. "This is ridiculous. You printed this off the internet. Anyone can make a fake bank letter. Ariel, you probably used Photoshop. God, this is pathetic. Trying to impress us with a fake piece of paper?" He looked at Sienna, desperate for an ally. "She is lying," he said to her, forcing a laugh that sounded like dry leaves crunching. "She works in IT support. She lives in a shoebox. This is just... It is a prank. It is a sick joke." I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The leverage was entirely on my side of the table. "Look at the bottom of the page." "Logan," I said, leaning back in my chair. "There is a contact number for the senior wealth manager at the bank. His name is Mr. Sterling. There is also a direct extension. If you do not believe me, put the phone on speaker and call him right now. He is expecting a call. I told him my family might have trouble grasping the concept of liquidity." Logan froze. He looked at the number. He looked at me. The bravado began to drain out of him, replaced by a dawning, horrifying realization. He knew me. He knew I was many things, quiet, boring, plain, but he knew I was not a liar. I had never lied to them. I had never had the energy to invent fictions. I was too busy surviving their reality. Diane stood up. She did not look at the letter. She looked at me. Her expression was shifting rapidly, like clouds moving across a storm front. The shock was fading, and something else was taking its place. It was a look I had seen her give Logan 1,000 times, but never me. It was a look of appraisal. It was the look a predator gives a wounded animal, or perhaps the look a miner gives a vein of gold they have just discovered in a rock they were about to discard. $150 million, she said softly. The words hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. "That is correct," I said. "And you sold it. When?" she asked, her voice trembling, but not with emotion, with excitement. "Last month," I replied. Diane sat back down slowly. She ignored the spilled wine soaking into the expensive tablecloth. She ignored the fact that dinner was ruined. She looked at Logan, who was still clutching the paper, his mouth slightly open. "Logan, give me the letter," she commanded. He handed it to her without a word. She smoothed it out on the table, her fingers tracing the digits. I watched her eyes. They did not fill with tears of pride. They did not soften with maternal warmth. They sharpened. They narrowed. I could almost hear the calculator clicking in her brain. She was doing the mental arithmetic of what $150 million could buy. She was paying off the mortgage. She was buying the beach house. She was funding Logan's next 5 failed ventures. "Oh, Ariel," she breathed, looking up at me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. This is overwhelming. Why did you not tell us sooner? We could have helped you negotiate. Your father knows people in finance. We could have made sure you got a fair deal." I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. "I had a team of lawyers. Mom," I said, "the deal is done. The money is in the bank. There is nothing to negotiate." Sienna, who had been silent this whole time, suddenly spoke up. She looked from Logan, with his stained shirt and his panic, to me, in my silk dress and my composure. "That is amazing. Ariel," she said, her voice filled with a genuine awe that cut through the tension. I read about the Ether Systems acquisition in the Wall Street Journal. They said the founder was staying anonymous during the transition. That was you? I nodded at her. That was me. Logan turned on Sienna, his face flushing red. Shut up, Sienna, he snapped. You do not know what you are talking about. Diane reached out and swatted Logan's arm. Do not speak to her like that. Logan, she hissed. Then she turned back to me, her face rearranging itself into a mask of benevolent matriarch. Ariel. Darling, this is a lot for a young woman to handle alone, she said, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper she used when she wanted to manipulate someone. That kind of money. It changes people. It attracts the wrong kind of attention. You need to be careful. You need family around you to protect you. I watched her weave the web. It took her less than 3 minutes to pivot from dismissing me as a failure to positioning herself as my protector. It was masterful. It was repulsive. I have been handling it just fine, I said. I have financial advisors. I have a legal team. I do not need protection. Logan finally found his voice again. He slammed his hand down on the table, making the silverware jump. So that is it? He demanded. You just sit there and drop this on us? You let me sit here and talk about my asset management business while you are sitting on a fortune? You were mocking me. You were laughing at me the whole time. I looked at him calmly. I was not laughing. Logan, I said, I was listening. I was listening to you talk about a penthouse you cannot afford. I was listening to you brag about deals that do not exist. I was listening to you belittle my work. The same work that just valued me at 9 figures. I was not laughing. I was waiting for you to ask me a single question about my life. Just one. But you never did. Logan's face twisted. He stood up, knocking his chair back. You think you are better than us now? He shouted. You think because you got lucky with some stupid app that you are the queen of the world? You owe us. Ariel, you owe Mom and Dad. They put a roof over your head. They fed you. You would be nothing without this family. Diane stood up too, but she moved to Logan, placing a hand on his chest. Logan, sit down, she said firmly. Sit down right now. He glared at her, but he obeyed. He sat down, breathing heavily. Diane turned back to me. She clasped her hands together on the table. Your brother is upset, she said smoothly. He is in shock. We all are. But he has a point. Ariel, we are a family. We do everything together. We struggle together. And we succeed together. This windfall, it is a blessing for all of us. I looked at my father. He was still staring at the letter, but now he was looking at me with a strange expression. It wasn't pride, it was fear. He knew. He knew exactly what was about to happen. He knew Diane was about to consume me, and he was too weak to stop it. It is not a windfall. Mom, I said, it is earnings. It is payment for 10 years of work. Of course, Diane said, waving her hand. But you have to be realistic. You are single. You have no husband, no children. What is a girl like you going to do with that kind of money? It is dangerous to have that much liquidity. You need to invest it. You need to secure the family's future. There it was, the we, the family's future. I picked up my fork. I looked at the dry turkey on my plate. I looked at the cold mashed potatoes. I have already invested it, I said. Diane's eyes widened. What? Where? You did not sign anything without consulting your father, did you? I invested it in myself, I said, and in causes that matter to me. Diane let out a tight, nervous laugh. Well, surely there is plenty left. Ariel, look at this house. The roof needs repairs. Your father's car is 10 years old. Logan needs seed capital to really get his firm off the ground. If you backed him, he could turn that money into double what you have. He has the vision. You have the capital. It is the perfect partnership. I looked at Logan. He was watching me now. The anger replaced by a naked greed. He was already spending my money in his head. He was seeing the cars, the watches, the trips. He was seeing a life where he never had to work again, funded by the sister he had tormented for 2 decades. I did not see a single ounce of regret in their eyes. I did not see them thinking. We treated her poorly. I did not see them thinking. We missed out on knowing an incredible woman. All I saw was a frantic recalibration of the power dynamic. They realized they had accidentally starved the golden goose, and now they were trying to figure out how to get it to lay an egg in their lap before it flew away. It was chilling. It was the coldest moment of my life, the realization that my value to them was strictly numerical. If I had come home broke, I would still be the invisible daughter, but because I came home rich, I was suddenly the beloved savior. I looked at the wine stain spreading on the cloth. It looked like blood. I am not investing in Logan, I said clearly. The room went still again. Excuse me? Diane said, her voice dropping an octave. I am not investing in Logan. I repeated. I am not buying a new roof. I am not buying Dad a car. Diane's face hardened. The mask slipped. The benevolent matriarch vanished, and the woman who had ignored me for 29 years returned. You ungrateful little brat, she whispered. After everything we did for you? I stood up. I was taller in my heels. I towered over her seated figure. I am just following the family tradition. Mom, I said, we invest in the sure things, right? We put our resources where the potential is, and frankly, Logan has not shown me a return on investment in 30 years. Diane's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Logan looked like he was about to explode. Sienna looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I picked up my purse. I did not pick up the leather envelope. I left the proof of funds letter on the table, right next to the stain. Enjoy the turkey, I said. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I could feel the air in the room vibrating with their rage and their greed. But I also felt something else. I felt light. I had dropped the bomb, and I was walking away from the explosion. The silence that followed me out of the room was not the silence of being ignored. It was the silence of people who had just realized they had lost the only thing that mattered to them: control. I did not make it to the front door. I had barely crossed the threshold of the dining room archway when the sound of weeping began. It was not the soft, stifled crying of someone trying to maintain their dignity. It was a theatrical, chest-heaving wail, designed to echo off the walls and physically hook me by the ankles. It was a sound I knew well. Diane had used it for years to guilt my father into buying new furniture, or to manipulate neighbors into forgiving Logan's vandalism. I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I stood there, my hand gripping the strap of my purse, listening to the performance. How could you? Diane sobbed, the words thick with manufactured heartbreak. How could you sit there and watch us suffer? We have been struggling. Ariel, struggling to keep this house, struggling to keep your brother's head above water, and you have been sitting on a dragon's hoard of gold, laughing at us. I turned slowly. The scene at the table had shifted from shock to a tableau of victimhood. Diane was slumped over the table, her face buried in her hands, though I noticed she was careful not to smudge her mascara too badly. Logan was no longer looking at the proof of funds letter. He was looking at me with a gaze that had curdled. The awe was gone, replaced by a sharp, corrosive jealousy. I walked back to the edge of the table. I did not sit down. I stood like a judge delivering a sentence. I was not laughing. Mom, I said calmly, and let us be clear about the definition of struggling. Struggling is deciding between heat and food. Struggling is walking 5 miles to work because you cannot afford bus fare. Struggling is not worrying about whether the country club fees are going to increase this year. Diane lifted her head. Her eyes were wet, but they were hard as flint. You have no idea what it costs to maintain a life, she snapped, the tears vanishing instantly as the negotiator emerged. We gave you everything, Ariel. We gave you a home. We gave you a childhood. And now, when we need you, you treat us like strangers. She reached out and grabbed Logan's hand, squeezing it tight. Your brother needs this, she said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. He has a concept, a brilliant concept. It is a crypto-based arbitrage firm. He just needs liquidity to get the servers running, with $10 million. Just $10 million. Ariel, which is nothing to you now. He could build something that rivals what you have done." I looked at Logan. He straightened up, puffing out his chest, emboldened by his mother's pitch. "It is true," he said, his voice regaining that arrogant swagger. "I have the network. I have the guys on Wall Street ready to buy in. I just need the seed capital. You got lucky. Ariel, you made a toy app and a big company bought it. That is fine. Good for you. But I'm talking about real finance. If you front me the $10 million, I will cut you in for 20% equity. It is a generous offer." I stared at him. The delusion was architectural in its scale. He was asking for $10 million as if he were asking for the salt shaker. 20%? I repeated. "You want me to give you $10 million of my hard-earned money for a minority stake in a company that does not exist, run by a man who has never held a job for longer than 6 months?" Logan's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "Do not talk to me like I am some loser," he spat. "I am an entrepreneur. I take risks. You played it safe. You hid in your room and wrote code. You have no idea how the real world works. You owe me this." "I owe you?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Yes," Logan shouted, standing up and knocking his chair over. "You owe me. I carried the weight of this family's expectations for 30 years. Do you know what it is like? To have everyone watching you? To have to be the star? You had it easy. Ariel, you got to be invisible. You got to make mistakes and no one cared. I had to be perfect. And now you show up with a winning lottery ticket and act like you are better than me?" The air in the room seemed to vibrate with his entitlement. Sienna was staring at her plate, wishing she could teleport away. Dad was pouring himself more wine, his hand shaking so bad the bottle clicked against the glass. I looked at Diane. She was nodding, agreeing with Logan's twisted revision of history. "He is right. Ariel," she said, "we put so much pressure on him. You were free. You were free to do whatever you wanted. We never burdened you with our dreams." I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It was a dark, jagged thing. "Free?" I asked. "Is that what you call it?" I stepped closer to the table, my shadow falling over the spilled wine. "Let us audit that freedom, shall we?" I said. "When I was 10, I wanted to take violin lessons. You told me we could not afford the rental fee. 2 weeks later, you bought Logan a drum kit that cost $2,000. He played it 3 times and then left it in the garage to rot." "That is different," Diane interrupted. "He showed aptitude." "When I was 16, I continued, ignoring her. I needed braces. My teeth were crowding, and it was painful. You told me it was a cosmetic expense and we had to prioritize. That same month, you sent Logan to a quarterback camp in Florida that cost $5,000, plus airfare. He never made varsity." "Ariel, stop keeping score." Logan groaned. "It is petty." "I am not finished," I said, my voice slicing through his complaints. "When I got into university on a full scholarship, a scholarship I earned because I knew you would never pay for my tuition, you did not even buy me a bus ticket to get there. I had to sell my old clothes to pay for the gas. Meanwhile, you paid for Logan's tuition, his fraternity dues, his car insurance, and his legal fees when he got a DUI. "That was a mistake," Logan yelled. "The cop had it out for me." "And when I started my company," I said, looking directly at Diane, "I lived on instant oatmeal and worked 20 hours a day. I did not ask you for a cent. I did not ask for a loan. I did not ask for seed capital. I built it brick by brick while you were refinancing this house to pay off Logan's gambling debts from his poker phase." Diane went pale. She glanced quickly at Sienna, realizing that the family laundry was being aired in front of a witness. "We never— That is private," Diane hissed. "It is relevant," I said. "You speak of family obligation. You speak of what I owe you. I have run the numbers. Mom, I have done the accounting. You invested roughly $500,000 into Logan over the last 15 years. And the return on that investment is a 31-year-old man who is asking his little sister for an allowance." Logan looked like he was going to lunge across the table. His fists were clenched on the tablecloth. "You are a bitch," he snarled. "A selfish, cold-hearted bitch. You think money makes you important? You are still just the weird little girl nobody wanted to talk to. You are going to die alone with your millions. Ariel, and we will be here, laughing." I looked him in the eye. He was trying to hurt me. He was trying to find the button that used to work, the one that made me feel small and unlovable. But he could not find it. I had disconnected the wiring years ago. I might be alone. "Logan," I said, "but I will be solvent, and I will be free. Can you say the same?" Diane stood up again, changing tactics instantly. She rounded the table and tried to grab my arm. I took a step back, keeping myself out of her reach. "Ariel, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling with a desperation that was almost genuine. "Do not do this. Do not let money destroy this family. We can work this out. We can set up a trust. You do not have to give him 10 million. Maybe just 5? Just enough to get him started? He is your brother. He is your blood. If you walk out that door without helping him, you are cutting off the only people who truly love you." I looked at her hand reaching for me. It was a hand that had never held mine when I was scared. It was a hand that had never wiped away my tears. It was a hand that was always open, waiting to take. "You do not love me, Mom," I said quietly. "You love the idea of having a successful child, and you are furious that you bet on the wrong horse." I turned my gaze to my father. He was looking at me, his eyes wet. For a second, I thought he might defend me. I thought he might finally stand up and say, "She is right. We failed her." But he just looked away. He picked up his wineglass and took a long, shuddering sip. He chose his comfort over my truth, just as he always had. I looked back at Diane. "I am not cutting you off," I said. "I am just declining the transaction." I turned my back on them. "Ariel!" Diane screamed, her voice shrill and panicked. "If you walk out now, do not bother coming back. You hear me? We will disown you." I paused for a fraction of a second. The threat hung in the air. Toothless and absurd. You cannot disown someone you never owned. You cannot banish someone who was never really there. I did not answer. I did not look back. I walked through the archway, down the hall past the gallery of Logan's mediocre achievements, and opened the front door. The cold night air hit my face, sharp and clean. It smelled of snow and pine, completely free of the scent of roasting turkey and stale resentment. Behind me, I heard the sound of glass shattering, perhaps Logan throwing his plate, or Diane sweeping the centerpiece off the table in a rage. It did not matter. It was just noise. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me. I walked to the rental car, my heels clicking on the pavement. I felt lighter with every step, as if gravity had released its hold on me. I got into the car, started the engine, and drove away. I did not check the rearview mirror. I knew what was back there, and I knew that for the first time in my life, I was not leaving anything behind. I was moving forward. I returned to my hotel suite, the silence of the room wrapping around me like a protective blanket. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water, sat in the velvet armchair by the window, and watched the lights of the city flicker below. I felt no guilt. I felt no remorse. I felt only the clinical detachment of a surgeon who had just successfully excised a malignant tumor. But the patient was not ready to accept the diagnosis. My phone began to vibrate on the coffee table. It buzzed once, then twice, then erupted into a continuous, angry spasm. I did not pick it up. I simply watched the screen light up with notifications. Diane was first. Her texts were a chaotic stream of consciousness, shifting wildly between martyrdom and rage. "You destroyed Christmas." The first one read, "I hope you are happy. Your father is having chest pains." Then, 5 minutes later, "We are willing to forgive you if you come back tomorrow and apologize. We can discuss a payment plan for Logan. We are family. We forgive." When I did not reply, the tone darkened. "You are a cold, heartless monster. I do not know who raised you." I almost laughed at that one. She had not raised me. I had raised myself in the vacuum she left behind. Then came Logan. His messages were not manipulative. They were violent. "You think you are safe?" he wrote. "You think you can just walk away with my money? That is family money. Ariel, you stole our future. Watch your back. I am going to sue you for everything you have." Another read. I have rights. I turned the phone off. I slept for 8 hours. The first dreamless, uninterrupted sleep I had experienced in years. 2 days later, the legal threat materialized. It did not come from a high-powered firm. It came from a strip mall lawyer named Barry, who had represented Logan during his second DUI charge. The letter was delivered to my hotel via courier. It was a masterpiece of legal absurdity. The document claimed that I had entered into a verbal contract with the family to support them financially in exchange for my upbringing. It cited promissory estoppel, alleging that I had made specific promises to fund Logan's business ventures, causing him to incur debts in anticipation of those funds. It demanded an immediate settlement of $20 million to cover past expenses, emotional distress, and loss of future earnings. I read the letter over breakfast. I did not panic. I did not call Diane screaming. I took a photo of the document and emailed it to my personal counsel, a man named Mr. Sterling, who was known in the legal world as the Shark. His reply came 3 minutes later. "Is this a joke?" he asked. "No," I typed back. "Handle it. Scorched earth." Mr. Sterling did not send a counteroffer. He did not propose mediation. He initiated a process that I like to call aggressive transparency. He sent a response to Barry, Logan's lawyer. That was less of a letter and more of an encyclopedia. We did not just deny the claims. We dismantled the entire history of the Marsh family finances. During the due diligence for my company's sale, I had been required to disclose my financial background. As part of that, I had hired forensic accountants to reconstruct my financial history to prove that none of my seed capital had come from illicit sources. I had years of bank statements, tax returns, and receipts. We sent Barry a detailed dossier. It contained a side-by-side comparison of parental spending. Column A, Logan Marsh. It listed the private tutors, the sports camps, the car purchases, the legal fees, the bail money, the rent subsidies, and the loans that were never repaid. The total came to nearly $600,000 over 15 years. Column B, Ariel Marsh. It listed nothing, no tuition payments, no car, no rent. The only expenses were the bare minimums required by law for food and shelter until the age of 18. We also included a sworn affidavit from me stating that I had never, at any point, promised to fund Logan's business. We attached the chat logs from the night of the dinner, where Logan admitted he was asking for money, proving there was no prior agreement. Mr. Sterling closed the letter with a simple paragraph. "If you proceed with this frivolous lawsuit, we will countersue for legal fees, and we will move for a full audit of your client's tax returns to determine if the business expenses he claims to have incurred were actually fraudulent. We are ready to go to court on Monday. Are you?" The lawsuit was withdrawn 6 hours later. Barry, realizing he was bringing a knife to a nuclear war, apparently advised Logan that he was walking into a trap. But the withdrawal of the lawsuit did not stop the bleeding. In fact, it was the pressure that caused the wound to burst. Logan, deprived of the easy payday he had convinced himself was coming, began to spiral. He had apparently borrowed money from some unsavory characters, loan sharks, or perhaps just very impatient bookies, on the promise that his rich sister was about to cut him a check. When the check did not materialize, he panicked. He decided to go public. He posted a long, rambling video on social media. In it, he claimed that the founder of Vitality, his own sister, had stolen the idea from him. He claimed that he was the creative genius behind the algorithm and that I had cut him out of the deal. He tagged tech blogs, news outlets, and influencers, trying to create a viral storm. "Justice for Logan," he captioned it, "the truth about the $150 million lie." For about 12 hours, it looked like it might gain traction. A few low-tier gossip sites picked it up. People love a story about a greedy tech mogul screwing over their family. But Logan had forgotten one thing. The internet is a detective agency that never sleeps. While I sat in my hotel room, refusing to comment, the online community went to work. They dug into Logan's past. They found his LinkedIn profile, which was full of inflated titles at companies that did not exist. They found the court records of his DUIs. They found the reviews for a previous business he had started, a drop shipping scam that had ripped off hundreds of customers. Then, they looked at me. They saw the Marsh Grant for Women in Technology. They saw the interviews with my former employees who spoke about how I paid them when I couldn't pay myself. They compared the dates. I was writing code while Logan was partying in fraternity houses. The timeline of his invention claim didn't match reality. The narrative flipped overnight. Logan went from being the victim to being the laughingstock of the tech world. The hashtag Justice for Logan became an ironic meme used to mock entitled mediocrity. That was when Diane decided to help, and as always, her help was the final nail in the coffin. She went on a local radio show to defend her son. She thought she could charm the audience with her devoted mother routine. "My son is a visionary," she told the host, her voice trembling with indignation. "Ariel has always been jealous of him. She was a difficult child. Very secretive. We always knew she was plotting something." The host, a sharp woman who had clearly done her research, paused. "Mrs. Marsh," the host said, "you say your daughter was difficult, but records show she graduated top of her class and built a company from scratch while working full-time. Your son, on the other hand, has been unemployed for 3 years. Is it possible that you are enabling him?" Diane lost her composure. "How dare you?" she snapped on live air. "You do not know my family. We are victims here. She has $150 million. She could give him $10 million and not even feel it. It is about fairness." "It sounds like it is about entitlement," the host replied coolly. The interview went viral. Diane's screeching demand for fairness became a soundbite on TikTok. She was branded the ultimate toxic parent. The local country club, which she prized above all else, quietly asked her to resign from the board to avoid the negative publicity. I watched it all unfold from my laptop screen. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. I did not push the button. I did not plant the explosives. All I had done was remove the structural support beam that was my silence. Without me there to absorb the blame, to hide their flaws, and to pay for their mistakes, the weight of their own dysfunction crushed them. "Mr. Sterling called me a week after the radio interview. We have received a communication from the district attorney's office," he said, his voice neutral, apparently, in his attempt to prove his business was real. Logan submitted some documents to investors that were, let us say, creatively edited. Now that the spotlight is on him, the authorities are looking at those documents. He is facing charges for wire fraud. I closed my eyes for a moment. I thought of the little boy I used to watch cartoons with, before Diane turned him into a golden idol. I felt a pang of sadness, sharp and deep, but then I remembered the way he had looked at me across the dinner table, the way he had called me a bitch because I wouldn't fund his delusions. "Do you want to intervene?" Mr. Sterling asked. "We could make a call. We could arrange a plea deal. We could pay restitution anonymously." I walked to the window. I looked out at the city, at the world that was wide and open and free. I had spent 29 years in a prison built by their expectations. If I bailed him out now, I would be walking right back into the cell. "No," I said firmly, "I do not want to intervene. He wanted to be a businessman. Mr. Sterling, let him experience the consequences of his business practices." "Understood. Mr. Sterling said, "I will close the file." I hung up the phone. The legal war was over. They had fired their dirty shots, and the ricochet had taken them down. I was the last one standing. Not because I had fought harder, but because I had refused to fight on their terms. I had simply told the truth, and the truth, as it turned out, was the deadliest weapon of all. Christmas Day arrived, not with a bang, but with a serene, snowy silence that settled over the city. For the first time in my life, I did not wake up to the sound of Diane slamming cupboard doors, or Logan complaining that the coffee was too weak. I woke up in the presidential suite, ordered a pot of tea and a plate of smoked salmon, and sat by the window watching the snow dust the rooftops. I had spent 29 Christmases feeling alone in a crowded room. This year, I was physically alone, yet I felt more connected to the world than I ever had at the Marsh family dinner table. I did not spend the day wallowing. I spent it working. But it was the kind of work that feeds the soul rather than draining it. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was not a text from my parents. They were likely still reeling from the radio disaster and the looming fraud investigation, but a message from a number I did not immediately recognize. "Hi, Ariel. It is Maya, Aunt Sarah's daughter. I know this is a terrible time and you probably hate everyone with the last name Marsh right now, but I was wondering if I could buy you a coffee? I am in the lobby." Maya, my father's brother's daughter. She was 22, a quiet, studious girl who had always been on the periphery of family gatherings. Much like I had been. While Logan was performing his antics for applause, Maya was usually in the corner reading. I had not spoken to her in years, mostly because Diane made a point of isolating us from Dad's less successful side of the family. I hesitated, then typed back, "Come up to the suite." 10 minutes later, Maya knocked on the door. She looked terrified. She was wearing a coat that had clearly seen better days and clutching a battered leather portfolio against her chest, as if it contained state secrets. "I am so sorry to bother you," she said, stepping into the room and looking around wide-eyed at the luxury. "I know you are dealing with a lot. I saw the news about Logan. It is intense." "It is necessary," I said, motioning for her to sit on the sofa. "Do you want tea?" She shook her head. "No, thank you. I actually wanted to show you something, and if you hate it, or if you think I am just another leech trying to get a piece of your money, please just kick me out. I will not be mad." I sat down opposite her. The fear in her eyes was genuine. It was the same fear I used to have. The fear of taking up space. The fear of asking for anything. "Show me," I said gently. She opened the portfolio. It was not a scribbled request for cash. It was a business plan. A detailed, meticulously researched proposal for a nonprofit organization focused on bringing coding literacy to underfunded rural schools in the state. She had budgets. She had curriculum outlines. She had letters of interest from 3 school districts. "I have been working on this for 2 years while I finished my teaching degree," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. "I tried to show Uncle Ray last Thanksgiving, but, well, Logan was talking about his crypto thing, so nobody really listened." I flipped through the pages. It was brilliant. It was scalable, practical, and driven by a genuine desire to help. It was everything Logan's schemes were not. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Maya took a deep breath. "Because I need a mentor. I do not know how to scale the back end. I saw what you did with Vitality. You built something that actually helps people. I do not want your money. Ariel, funding would be amazing, obviously, but what I really want is to know how you survived the first 2 years without burning out. I want to know how you made the architecture stable." I looked at her. She wasn't asking for a handout. She was asking for a ladder so she could climb herself. I closed the portfolio and smiled. "I will not give you the money," I said. Maya's face fell, and she began to pack up her things immediately. "I understand. I'm sorry I asked." "Sit down." "Maya," I said firmly, "I will not give you the money as a gift. I will write a grant check from my new foundation to cover your operating costs for the first 3 years, and in exchange, you are going to meet with me once a month so I can help you refine the code and the business strategy. This is not a handout. It is an investment." Maya froze. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling over before she could wipe them away. 3 years?" she whispered. "You have a good plan," I said, "and unlike the rest of this family, you actually did the work before you asked for the reward." That afternoon, we spent 4 hours sketching out a roadmap for her nonprofit. It was the best Christmas present I could have given myself. I realized that my money was not just a shield. It was a tool. I could use it to water the plants that deserved to grow. rather than wasting it trying to revive the dead weeds of my immediate family. By the time New Year's Eve rolled around, the shift in my life was palpable. The Marsh Grant for Women in Technology officially launched, the press release went out, and within 48 hours, we had received over 300 applications. Reading the stories of these women, single mothers trying to learn Python at night, teenagers building robots in their garages, validated everything I had done. I was not hoarding my wealth. I was redistributing it to the people Diane would have looked down on. Simultaneously, I pushed an update to Vitality. I made the premium tier, the one that generated the most revenue, free for any user with a verified student email or a low-income subsidy card. My board at Ether Systems pushed back initially, worried about the revenue dip, but I held the 51% voting rights on product direction during the transition. We are not just building a product, I told them in a video conference, we are building trust. The public response was overwhelming. The narrative that Logan had tried to spin, that I was a greedy sister leaving her family in the dirt, was completely drowned out by the reality of my actions. I was helping thousands of strangers. I was helping Maya. The only people I wasn't helping were the ones who felt entitled to my help. Diane, however, interpreted this differently. To a narcissist, generosity toward others is not a sign of character. It is a sign of resources that are being misallocated. In her mind, if I had enough money to fund a rural school program and give away app subscriptions, I clearly had enough to solve her problems. She mistook my philanthropy for softness. She ambushed me in the hotel lobby on the 2nd of January. I was on my way to a meeting with the city council regarding a zoning permit for the foundation's new headquarters. I stepped out of the elevator, checking my notes, and there she was. She was sitting on a velvet ottoman near the fountain, wearing large sunglasses and a headscarf, looking like a celebrity trying to avoid the paparazzi, or a woman trying to hide her shame. She stood up as I approached. She looked thinner. The stress of the last week, the public humiliation, and the legal looming over Logan had taken a physical toll. "Ariel," she said. Her voice was not the screeching weapon it had been at dinner. It was raspy and tired. I stopped. I did not invite her to sit. I did not smile. "Mom," I said, "I have a meeting in 20 minutes. "I know," she said, clutching her purse. "I saw the announcement about your foundation. It is very impressive. The news is calling you a saint." "I am not a saint," I said. "I am just doing what makes sense." She stepped closer, lowering her sunglasses. Her eyes were rimmed with red. "If you can help those girls, Ariel, those strangers who never did a thing for you, surely you can find it in your heart to help your brother." I sighed. "We are not doing this again." "Please, listen," she begged, catching my sleeve. "It is bad. Ariel, the fraud charges. They are not just looking at fines. They are talking about prison time, real prison. He is terrified. He is just a boy. He made a mistake because he wanted to impress us. He wanted to be like you. He is 31 years old." I reminded her. "He is not a boy, and he did not want to be like me. He wanted to be rich without doing the work." "He needs a defense attorney," Diane said, the desperation leaking out. "A real one, not the strip mall idiot we used before. We found a firm in the city, but they want a retainer of $250,000. We do not have it. Ariel, the equity in the house is gone. Your father's retirement is tied up." She looked at me with a pleading intensity that might have broken me 10 years ago. "Just write the check for the lawyer," she said. "That is all I ask. Pay the retainer. And I promise, we will never ask you for another cent. We will sign a contract. I will sign the house over to you. Anything. Just do not let him go to jail." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had bought Logan a car while I took the bus. I looked at the woman who had called me a liar when I showed her my bank statement. I thought about Maya, working 2 jobs to fund her dream. I thought about the single mothers applying for my grant. That $250,000 could fund 5 full college scholarships. It could change the trajectory of 5 families forever. Or It could keep Logan out of jail for another 6 months until he scammed someone else. I pulled my arm away from her grip. No, I said. Diane recoiled as if I had slapped her. You would let him go to prison? She whispered. Over money? Not over money. Mom, I said, over accountability. I adjusted my coat. I am helping people. Mom, I am helping Maya build a future. I am helping women who have been told they are not smart enough. I am helping people who are willing to work. Logan had every advantage in the world. He had your love, your money, your attention. If he is in a hole now, it is because he dug it with the shovel you gave him. Ariel, please, she cried out, causing heads to turn in the lobby. I leaned in close, my voice low and hard. If you want a lawyer, sell the jewelry you bought to show off to the neighbors. Sell the second car. Do what I did for years. Sacrifice. But do not come to me and ask me to rob the deserving to save the entitled. I checked my watch. I have to go. My driver is waiting. I walked past her. She stood there, frozen by the fountain, a monument to a fading world of appearances and lies. I walked out through the revolving doors into the crisp winter air. I felt a pang of sadness. Yes, it is never easy to watch your family self-destruct, but beneath the sadness was a bedrock of certainty. I was building a new legacy, one defined not by blood, but by merit, and for the first time, I knew exactly who belonged in it, and who did not. The final visit to my hometown was not a pilgrimage, it was a foreclosure. I returned 3 weeks after Christmas, on a Tuesday that was gray and bitter cold. The snow had turned to slush, coating the streets in a dirty, frozen gray that matched the mood of the house I was about to enter. I did not book the hotel this time. I did not bring a suitcase. I had a flight back to the city scheduled for 5 o'clock that evening. This was not a visit. It was a transaction. My lawyers had been busy. In the wake of Logan's fraud scandal, my parents had panicked. They had liquidity issues that went far deeper than I had realized. To pay the retainer for the high-end defense firm Diane insisted on hiring. They had taken out a high-interest bridge loan against the equity of the house, but they had missed the first 2 payments because Dad's retirement fund was frozen pending the investigation into Logan's business dealings. The bank had moved to accelerate the debt. The bank, however, was a national chain that was happy to offload distressed assets for a lump sum. Through a shell company managed by Mr. Sterling, I had purchased that debt. I now owned the paper on the house I grew up in. I was no longer the daughter. I was the institution. I parked the rental car at the curb. I walked up the driveway. I did not knock. I still had my key, a small piece of brass I had kept on my ring for 10 years, perhaps waiting for a moment when I would need to unlock the truth. I opened the door. The house was quiet. It smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. Boxes were stacked in the hallway. Not moving boxes, but boxes of files. They were trying to organize a defense for a son who was indefensible. Diane and Logan were in the living room. My father was at the kitchen table, head in his hands. When I walked in, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Logan jumped up, looking haggard. He had lost weight. His arrogance had been replaced by a twitchy, cornered animal desperation. Diane looked up from a stack of papers, her face pale. "Ariel?" she said, her voice cracking. "What are you doing here? Did you change your mind? Did you bring the check?" I walked to the coffee table and placed a single blue folder on it. I did not sit down. I kept my coat on. "I did not bring a check for the lawyers. Mom," I said, "I brought a solution for the house." Logan's eyes lit up. "The house? You paid off the loan?" "Thank God. I told you. Mom, I told you she would come through. Blood is thicker than water." He took a step toward me, a smile trying to break through the fear on his face. "I knew you were not a monster. Ariel," he said, "I knew you would not let us lose everything." I held up a hand. "Read the folder." "Logan?" He froze. He looked at the folder, then at me. He reached down and opened it. He began to read the legal text. His smile vanished. His face went gray. "What is this?" he whispered. It is a restructuring agreement, I said, looking at Diane. I have purchased the debt on this property. The bank no longer owns the mortgage. I do? Diane gasped. You bought our house? I bought the debt, I corrected, and I am willing to forgive the entire balance. I am willing to sign the deed over to you, free and clear. You will never have to make another payment. You will be secure. Diane let out a sob of relief. She slumped back onto the sofa. Oh, Ariel, thank you. I knew it. I knew you loved us. This saves us. We can use the equity to pay for Logan's defense. We can— There are conditions, I interrupted. The room went silent. Conditions? Diane asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. I pointed to the second page of the document. Read Clause B, I said. Logan read it out loud, his voice shaking. The forgiveness of the debt is contingent upon the following. 1. Diane Marsh must admit, in writing, to a history of emotional neglect and financial favoritism regarding her children. 2. Diane Marsh must attend weekly psychotherapy sessions with a licensed provider approved by the lender for a minimum of 1 year. 3. No portion of the home's equity may be used, borrowed against, or liquidated to fund legal defense, business ventures, or personal debts incurred by Logan Marsh. Logan dropped the folder as if it were burning his hands. You are joking, he spat. You are actually joking. You want Mom to sign a confession? You want to cut me off completely? I looked at Diane. She was staring at me, her mouth a tight line of fury. This is humiliation, she hissed. You came all the way here to humiliate me? To make me sign a paper saying I was a bad mother? I did everything for you. I sacrificed my life for this family. You sacrificed me for him, I said calmly, and now I am giving you a choice. You can keep your house, Mom. You can live here in peace for the rest of your life. But you have to admit the truth, and you have to stop enabling him. If you sign that paper, the house is yours. If you do not, I execute the foreclosure. You have 30 days to vacate. Diane stood up. She was trembling, vibrating with a rage that was almost nuclear. I will never sign that, she screamed. I will not let you destroy my dignity. I will not let you dictate how I treat my son. He is in trouble. He needs us. And you want me to abandon him to save a pile of bricks? He is a grown man. Mom, I said, and he committed a crime. He made a mistake, she shrieked. And you are the criminal. You are a predator. You come in here with your money and try to buy my soul? Get out. Get out of my house. It is not your house, I said quietly. Not anymore. Logan lunged at me. He grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. Fix this, he yelled, spit flying from his mouth. Fix this right now. You have $150 million. You could buy this whole town. Why are you doing this? Why do you hate me? I looked at him. I did not struggle. I just looked at him with a profound, exhausting pity. I do not hate you, Logan, I said. I just refuse to be your victim anymore. I pulled away from his grip. He stumbled back, hitting the coffee table. He looked at Diane. Mom, do something, he pleaded. She's going to kick us out. Diane looked at me. Her eyes were full of hate. Pure, unadulterated hate. She had made her choice. She would rather be homeless with her golden boy than safe with the daughter she despised. She would rather cling to the lie of her perfect parenting than accept the truth and save her home. I will see you in hell. Ariel, she whispered. I picked up the folder. I closed it. No, Mom, I said. You will not see me at all. I turned to my father. He was still sitting at the kitchen table. He had not moved. He had not spoken. He had watched the entire scene unfold with the same passive cowardice that had defined my childhood. Goodbye, Dad, I said. He did not look up. I walked to the door. I opened it and stepped out into the cold. I heard Logan screaming behind me, a raw, animal sound of panic. I heard Diane sobbing, comforting him, telling him it was going to be okay, telling him that I was the devil. I walked to the car. I got in and locked the door. I started the engine. I drove down the street, past the manicured lawns, past the elementary school where I had eaten lunch alone, past the park where I had read books to avoid going home. I drove until I reached the edge of town, where the highway opened up and led toward the airport. I pulled over onto the shoulder. I put the car in park. And then I broke. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel and I cried. I cried so hard my chest hurt. I cried until I couldn't breathe. But I was not crying for them. I was not crying for the house. I was not crying because I felt guilty. I was crying because for 29 years, I had held out a tiny, secret hope that if I just achieved enough, if I was just good enough, they would finally love me. I was crying because that hope was finally dead. I was mourning the little girl who had waited by the window for a dad who never defended her and a mom who never saw her. I let the tears come. I let them wash away the last of the dust from that house. And when the tears stopped, I wiped my face. I looked in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but they were clear. I put the car in drive. I merged onto the highway. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light over the road ahead. I was going back to the city, back to Maya, back to my foundation, back to a life that I had built with my own hands. I was an orphan now, by choice and by circumstance, and for the first time in my life, I was entirely, completely whole. I told them about the $150 million to make them look at me for just 1 second. But the real gift I gave myself that Christmas was the promise that I would never again return to be the life raft for the people who had spent a lifetime trying to drown me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Ariel's decision. Did she go too far? Or was it exactly what they deserved? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this journey with even more listeners.